Hi, my name is Ryan Wolf, and I'm the president at Ability Ministry, and I'm so glad that you've tuned in to another one of our training videos. Today, we're going to talk about church campus accessibility. All right. One of the things that's so important about campus accessibility is that your campus, and I say campus, I don't say church because campus includes a lot of things outside of your building. Your campus communicates a message to your visitors, specifically your visitors that are personally affected by disability. You see, they may get a message communicated to them before they ever step foot in the door that you don't want them to hear, based on what your campus is speaking. So what we have done is we have created a church campus accessibility checklist. I'll get to that in just a second. But I want to tell you a story first before I get into the details of the checklist. I was recently doing a training at a very large church, and it was just a general awareness training. So I was doing a lot of different things to help people see disability in a new light. Maybe for the first time, seeing what God believes about disability, what it's like to experience disability, even if it's just in a very short, finite period of time through a hands-on activity, sharing with them statistics. And then I got to the point where I was talking about campus accessibility, and I had a couple different activities. And one of the activities was this. I had the executive pastor at the church come and sit down in a wheelchair. And I gave him a task. My task that I gave him was to be able to unlock the wheelchair, which he didn't know how to do. And most people that have never been around a wheelchair don't know that there's actually locks on the wheels. First, he had to unlock the wheelchair. Second, he had to navigate it out the door, which he couldn't do on his own, so he had to ask for help. The next thing I asked him to do was simply to go to the nearest men's restroom, and to wash his hands. Come back into the room and tell us about his experience. Well, it took him a while again to get the wheelchair unlocked and then to get out the door, and then he was gone for a while. We went on to the next activity. We were working on different things, and eventually he came back through the door, and he was completely dejected, and you could see it on his face. And I said, "Hey, how was that experience?" And he felt horrible. He said, "I couldn't wash my hands." And I'm like, "Well, wait a minute. What do you mean you couldn't wash your hands?" He said, based on where we had the soap dispenser located on the wall and the paper towel dispenser on the wall, he said, "I couldn't reach either of them, therefore I couldn't wash my hands." And I said, wow, what does that communicate to someone who's using a wheelchair in your facility? And he said this, and I'll never forget it. He said it communicates that we haven't thought about them. And if that message is being spoken by your campus, it tells people affected by disability that they're not important because they haven't even been thought about. And that's not a message that you want to communicate. It doesn't match your heart. It doesn't match what you believe, right? But a lot of times, if you're not careful about what your church campus is saying, you never have an opportunity to share your heart with people affected by disability because they may come in your building and walk right back out because your church campus is communicating things like, "We haven't thought about you. You're not important. We don't want to welcome you or take the time to invest in making our campus accessible and welcoming." These are all messages that are negative, messages that don't match your heart. And that's why we have created this church campus accessibility checklist. It's available on our resources page at abilityministry.com. You can download it there, or you can download it here with this training package. And what I'd like to do with you for the remainder of this time is just to walk through some of those sections that are on our accessibility checklist. But before I do that, I would encourage you to do this with your team. Now, it doesn't matter if your church is an old building that you know is out of date and you know is not accessible, or if it's a newer building. The training that I did that I mentioned with the executive pastor in the wheelchair, it was a new building. You would think that it would be completely up to date, but churches are not, they don't have to follow the ADA. They don't have to be accessible. So a lot of times things aren't always done up to code, or maybe are overlooked. So I would encourage you, with your team, no matter what team you're on at your church, download this church accessibility checklist and do it as a team. Go through every area of your building. Check yes or check no. And if you check no, there's a spot on this checklist for an action plan. Come up with an action plan. It may not be that you can address every single thing that needs to be addressed, within this budget year, but at least put a date to it and make sure that you're going to address it. So next time you run into an issue, you can say, you know what? We have thought about that, and we are going to address that. So let's go through some of the sections that are on the church campus accessibility checklist. The first section that is on the checklist is the parking lot and the building entrance. Like I said, your campus will communicate a message to your guests that are affected by disability before you ever have a chance to say hello to them. So therefore, there are things that you need to think about, whether it's about parking spaces, whether it be the location of parking spaces, whether it be signage, whether it be where the curbs are cut out so people with wheelchairs can get in. There's so many different things that if you don't live with disability, you don't think about. And you need a checklist like this to help you make sure you're being accessible from the parking lot to the building entrance. And you'll notice that there is a progression to this. This is the natural progression of where people come from outside to inside in your church. The next thing that people are going to engage with is signage. Is your signage up to date? And is it directing people where they need to go? Do you have Braille? Are the signs at the appropriate places? There's so many different things with signage that oftentimes, again, we take for granted if we don't live with disability. So if they've made it from the parking lot into the entrance and they've seen signage, chances are they're probably going to stop at the restroom before they go sit down for an hour-long or so service. So there's so many things, again, in the restroom that communicate a message to a guest that lives with disability. Are there accessible bathrooms? Is there an adult changing table? Oftentimes we see a child's changing table, but children with disabilities don't stay children with disabilities. If they need a change table when they become an adult, oftentimes, if there's not an option like that, church is not an option for people affected by disability that have personal care options. What height, is the sink? What height are the paper towels? What about the soap dispensers? And all those things. So we have recommendations on heights on our checklist. After the restroom, they're probably going to head into the worship center. And we have a whole litany of things that you can go through and check for accessibility issues in your worship center. Whether it be ramps, whether it be a flat service. Are there spots for wheelchairs? Are there more than just a few spots in the back corner for wheelchairs? Are there spots for wheelchairs in the front row, in the middle of rows? Are there large print Bibles and hymnals and bulletins available? Are there auditory things that you can address for people that are hearing impaired? What about sign language? What about, there's so many different things. Download the checklist. Check them off. See how accessible your worship service is. If they're going to go beyond the worship center, they might be going to a class. There are different issues in classrooms that may or may not be accessible. And beyond classrooms, there are just additional items that some churches may have and other churches may not. Whether it be elevator access, whether it be accessibility to a water fountain that is accessible, whether it be a wheelchair accessible van or vehicle or transportation for churches. There's so many things that we don't think about because we're so busy as church leaders getting ready for Sunday. And then we are trying to recover from Sunday, and then we're just trying to get ready for the next Sunday. That oftentimes things like this slip through the cracks, especially if we don't live with disability ourselves. We don't see it, and therefore our campus may be sending a message that we don't want it to send. Download the checklist. Do it as an exercise as a team. Anything that you mark no, put an action plan to it. Address it in the near future. That way you can tell people, you know what? We have thought of you. You are important, and we are addressing these issues because we want you to be a part of our church body. because we value you, because God values you. So we hope that this has been helpful. We hope that this will be helpful for you. We would encourage you to keep checking back every month as we post a new training video. And we thank you once again for tuning in at abilityministry.com.